योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचाम् मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवनं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर् गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So in the previous session we started looking at the Sutra 3.49 sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ sarvajñātṛtvaṃ cha. We had not yet started looking at Vyasa's Bhashya, so we'll be doing that today. So as a quick reminder, the sutra said sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya, which means sattva means the antakaranam, the inner instrument, the chitta, in its purest form, untainted by the rajoguna and tamoguna, the impurities of that form. So the chitta, or the inner instrument, the antakaranam, the sattva, in its purest form. And then the purusha, which is not material, not made up of prakriti, not made up of sattva, raja, tama, but a metaphysical entity. The realization of the difference between the two. Because the chitta in its purest form, in one sense, is very similar to the purusha, being devoid of impurities and receiving or being under the influence of the consciousness, so to speak, the chitti shakti coming from the purusha. At the same time, it is extremely different from the purusha because it is made up of prakriti, it has an ever-changing nature, it is jada, so it is not a knower, it is only an instrument of knowing. So in that sense, it is very different as well. So the khyati, or the realization, the khyati matra of that, of the difference between the two, is what is being referred to here. And as discussed last time, the term matra refers to the artha matra nirbhasa, which we had seen in the first chapter, where in the state of this kind of samapatti, the yogi is not even conscious of the process of knowing, but only of the known subject or the knowable. So that is artha matra. So if the vishaya, or the thing being known, that alone forms the cognitive content of the chitta, and not even the fact that it is being known. So that is artha matra. So that is the khyati matra referred to here. So here the khyati is about the difference between the shuddha antakaranam, or the sattva, and the purusha, the difference between them. So sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya sayyamat, which is sort of implicit here, or the result of that. So it is not that the sayyama is necessarily being done on that, but the anyata-khyati has arisen, that knowledge has arisen, then there is a certain siddhi. So what is the siddhi? Sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. As discussed last time, sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ is sometimes referred to as kriyaishvarya, the aishvarya, the lordship, in terms of the kriya, the ability as a adhisthata. So the Adhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ refers to the superintendence. So the yogi has superintendence because everything is in some sense under his control in this state for each and every kind of entity. So that is sarvabhāva. So sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, that is one siddhi or one sort of a superpower, so to speak, arising from this. And the other is sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. This is the, just like that was Kriya Ishwarya, this is Jnana Ishwarya. So this is about the knowing, the direct perception, direct realization. So the Jnana and the lordship in the sense of the Jnanam. So here sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, the ability to know all, know everything. So these are the two siddhis that come together to the yogi as a result of the direct realization of the difference between the sattva and the purusha. So that is what the sutra says. Now Vyasa elaborates in the bhashya. Vyasa begins by saying, Nirdhuta rajastamo malasya buddhisattvasya pare vaisharadye parasyam vashikara sanyāyām vartamanasya sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. So now let us look at this. So first he says, Nirdhuta rajastamo malasya buddhisattvasya. So the buddhisattva of what nature? One that has been purified of all the impurities that come about due to the rajoguna and the tamoguna. So those impurities have gone away. So the sattva alone completely dominates. So nirdhuta rajotama malasya buddhisattvasya. Buddhisattva again refers to the inner instrument, the chitta. Now, pare vaisharadye parasyam vashikara sanyāyām. So here, this great purity, the supreme purity, and then parasyam vashikara sanyāyām. So this we had looked at when we had seen vairagya in the previous chapter. So the vashikara sanya vairagyam, that particular vairagya in which there is no appeal of the objects to the mind or the senses. So there is the tendency to go towards worldly objects is completely gone away. That is known as Vashikara Vairagyam. Elsewhere, it is sort of defined or elaborated as Vashikara Vairagyat Vishaya Pravrittihinam Cheto Vivekakhyatimātrasya bhavati. So one reaches this Vashikara Vairagyam, or as it is said, Pare Vaisharadye Parasyam Vashikara Sanyāyām. So in this state, the Vishayabhimukhata, the tendency to face or go towards worldly objects, objects of the senses, does not exist at all. That tendency has been completely conquered. And therefore, the yogi can be completely established in this Vivekakhyati that is the topic of discussion here. So Parasyam Vashikara Sanyāyām Vartamanasya. So the yogi who is in this state, who is in the Vashikara Sanya, Vairagyam, which is known as Vashikara. sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya. Okay, so if there is no tendency towards worldly objects, objects of the senses, or Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, the sound, touch, form, etc. If there is no tendency to go towards that, then what is the condition of this inner instrument of the chitta? The condition is sattva purusha anyata khyati matra rupa pratishtha, and of such a yogi who is completely established in the clear difference between the purest form of the chitta and the purusha, which are so similar and yet so different. And that difference is being realized. And again, as it was said, khyati matra means only that realization remains. Even the fact that I know, or the aspect of I know has gone away, and only the object, the knowable, is present. And the yogi is completely established in that. So that is pratishtha. So of such a yogi, pratishtasya, sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. So the siddhi that arises is sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, which is something I just described what that refers to. Complete superintendence of all kinds of entities, all kinds of knowables. Now Vyasa elaborates that. He says, sarvatmanaha gunaha vyavasayatmakaha swaminam kshetrajñam prati ashesha drishyatmatvena upatishthantah ityartha. So he clearly says what this sarvadhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ means, what it refers to. So Vyasa says, sarvatmanaha gunaha. So the gunas, sattva, raja, tama, are such that everything is constituted of them. So they are capable of being everything. And everything finally can be said to be constituted of sattva, raja, tama. So in context of gunas who are of this nature, so what are they? Sarvatmanaha and also vyavasayatmakaha. Here vyavasaya refers to jnanam. Vyavasaya refers to the knowable. So all knowledge and knowable. So everything is in this world, as per the ancient tradition, even the Nyaya Shastra, etc. Everything is said to be knowable. Everything can be cognized. So when somebody refers to in the Shastras as something that is Nyaya, that refers to each and everything in this creation falls into the Nyaya category, since it can be known. So vyavasayatmakaha. So everything that can be known or everything that exists is made of a sattva, raja, tamo guna. So therefore they are said to be of the form or capable of bringing about each and everything. So vyavasayatmakaha. Similarly, vyavasaya also, all the jnanam, the instrument of jnanam is also through the sattva, raja, tamo gunas. So sarvatmanaha gunaha vyavasayatmakaha. They are of the nature of bringing about all knowledge and knowables. So what do they do? Swaminam kshetrajñam prati ashesha drishyatmatvena upatishthantah. So all these gunas, what they do, they come into the presence of their Swami, of their Lord, who is the kshetrajña. Now the term kshetrajña is also very interesting and fascinating here, because as you probably know, the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Kshetra Kshetrajña Jnanam or Kshetra Kshetrajña Yoga, there the Shariram or the body, the embodiment is said to be the Kshetra, or loosely translated as field, and the Kshetrajña is the knower of the field, who is the Atma, the Purusha. So here, for the gunas, this Purusha is the Swami, he is the Lord, because as we had seen, from a point of view of purpose, which was referred to as teleology, all the activities of Prakriti are for the Purusha. So that is what lends the purpose. So now the gunas, for whom again as we had seen earlier, the Prakriti is Swam. Swam means something that belongs to another. And the Purusha is the Swami, the one to whom it belongs. So we had seen Swam Bhavati, something we had seen in a previous sutra. So here the gunas, they present themselves to the Swami, who is the Kshetrajna, that is the Purusha. They present themselves in what manner, in what way? Swaminam Kshetrajnam Prati Ashesha Drishyatmatvena Upatishtantaha. So they present themselves in a form that is Ashesha. Ashesha means nothing remains. Everything is included. So complete. Ashesha Drishyatmatvena. Drishya means whatever can be seen, whatever can be cognized by the seer, which is the entirety of creation. All of that. So all the things that can be made through bhutas, that can be cognized by the indriyas, whether settled, whether gross, everything. Ashesha drishyatmatvena upatishtantaha means they come into the presence of the Purusha. So they present themselves in a form that includes each and every possible entity of the creation. Because they are able to do that, because everything is made up of the sattva, raja, tamo gunas anyway. So all of that come into the presence of the Purusha together, or the presence of the yogi together. And therefore, that is known as sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. And that is the meaning, says Vyasa. So he says, iti arthaha. So that is the meaning of the first siddhi, sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ.
So, the Viveka Khyati which is coveted in yoga, in the final stages of yoga, that is being referred to here as sattvapuruṣānyatākhyāti. And with that, the sattva, as you have heard, it is coming to mention the buddhi tattva in its purest form, pristine form, without rajatama malas, without any taint or dirt of the nature of rajaguna and tamoguna. And that's why the word sattva for it, which is actually denoting the buddhi in its pure form. Then Purusha, the Atma Tattva, the metaphysical spiritual entity. So the discrimination between the two, as you just now heard, that they are similar but not similar. They are not similar but similar. And we had discussed this on an earlier occasion. So that is the Viveka Khyati, with which one is more familiar. With that Viveka Khyati, it is not just giving discriminate discernment, but it also can be bestowing certain powers. And one of those powers is sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, the superintendency over all that is material, all that is made up of Prakriti, all that is of the nature of Prakriti in all its phases, from subtlest to the grossest. So that is the superintendency, and that is sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. Now, the Prakriti is either in the form of grahya or grahana. And as you know, the grahitru, the third entity, is the entity of the Purusha Tattva, Atma Tattva. So the entire rest is grahya and grahana. So those are all gunatmaka. All knowables and all knowings are of the nature of sattva tamoguna. The material is sattva tamoguna for all knowables and knowings. And that's mentioned in the term vyavasayatmakaha. And then the Purusha Tattva is the Swami. As you are repeatedly told that he gets the superintendency by this siddhi. That means the mastership over the Prakriti, and that is why he is Swami. And again, in the earlier occasion, we had seen the class with the dual of Swam and Swami is the second chapter. So Purusha Tattva is referred to as a Swami because the Buddhi is his possessed entity and he is the possessor of that entity, and that's why he is Swami, the master. And Purusha is also Kshetrajna, as you just now heard. So the Prakriti presents itself absolutely, completely, totally. And that is why he says, Prati Asheshaha Drishyatmatvena Upasthitaha. It presents itself completely and totally. So now it just doesn't present, but he has the Swamitva over it. He has the mastership over it. That is called sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. The Prakriti presents to us also, although not completely, partially. But then we are not the masters over it, but in the worldly, mundane condition, we know that we actually become slaves of it. This is our condition. We are slaves of the matter. We are slaves of the Prakriti. The Prakriti governs and rules over us. While here, in the pristine state of the Buddhi and the distinction between such Sattva and Purusha, what happens is that the Purusha gets the Swamitvam, which is the essential state. Quintessentially, Atma Tattva, Purusha Tattva is the master. But because of the mundane gravities and by mundane delusion and mundane mire, it is turned around the other way. The Prakriti becomes the master and we become the slaves of it, which is a delusive condition. Now the delusion is gone because of the Samadhi process. And the whole Prakriti presents itself to Purusha, which is not our case. In our case, many of the things are concealed. The complete Prakriti is not presenting itself to we commoners. Whereas, for such a yogi who has sattvapuruṣānyatākhyāti, it cannot maintain something as reserved, something as concealed, but it totally, absolutely, totally presents itself. That has been made clear in Vyasa's comment. And that is why he has a mastership. Because nothing is concealed. And therefore he is able to get the mastership. If something is concealed, then of course the mastership will not be actualizing. Sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ implies that Prakriti cannot conceal, or nothing of the Prakriti can be concealed. And that is clearly predicated in this commentary, or the statement of Vyasa. So that's how the Purusha Tattva is in true sense the Swami. And as an outcome of it, this is Siddhi, that is, he has ownership and power and governorship over all the phases of Prakriti. So that's how this Siddhi is. So it should be imagined that Jnanaishwarya and Kriyaishwarya, as you heard just now, that's how sometimes it is construed that yogi is almost equal to Ishvara. Because whatever is the power of Ishvara, yogi too gets that power. Because he has complete governance over the Prakriti. The Prakriti is completely under his control. Now, is it really the equation that yogi becomes equal to Ishvara? So this has been discussed in Brahma Sutras, Vedanta Sutras, whether there is a monism between the Purusha and the Brahma. So clearly ruled out, it's not the case. So there is a wonderful topic which comes in Brahma Sutra. It says, Jagad Vyapara Varjam. Power to be governing everything, but all that power excludes something that is called Jagad Vyapara Varjam. which is exclusively with divinity, which is exclusively with the Brahman, which is exclusively with Ishvara. So although he gets that Jnana Ishvarya and Kriya Ishvarya, still there is that difference, and this is the topic which is discussed in Brahma Sutras in Jagat Vyapara Varjadikaranam. So sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ doesn't give him lordship, however he is a lord of the Prakriti. So that's an aspect of mysticism which clarifies the position and condition. So that's the first part of the Siddhi out of sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya, that kind of samyama. Okay.
Okay. So Vyasa continues. He says, now he'll explain sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. So he says, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ sarvatmanam gunanam shantodita vyapadeshya dharmatvena vyavasthanam akramoparudam vivekajam jnanam ityartah ityesha vishoka nama siddhihi yam prapya yogi sarvajñah kshina klesha bandhanah vashi viharati. So what is this sarvajñātṛtvaṃ? He says sarvajñātṛtvaṃ sarvatmanam gunanam. So once again, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ is about the gunas, and in the context of the gunas being such that everything is made up of them. So sarvatmanam gunanam shanta udita avyapadeshya dharmatvena. So the gunas manifest, and we had seen when we looked at the different parinamas, so dharma, lakshana, avastha, parinama, etc., when we had seen, and even elsewhere we have seen that the gunas, there are certain states, certain gunas or certain states of gunas where it is either latent or it is very much manifest, or it is yet to come, etc. So which has come and gone away, which essentially refers to what we call past tense, present tense, and future tense. Because the gunas, or each and every entity, as per the Yoga Darshana, comes about through transformation. So, and nothing comes out of the blue. So everything that's yet to come is present in a so-called latent state. And everything has happened will sort of go away in the to become the Shanta state, that it has passed and something else becomes manifest. So all the past, present, future aspects of everything that can come about through the gunas, which is essentially everything. So Shanta udita avyapadeshya dharmatvena vyavasthitanam akramoparudam. Krama means sequence, which is like ordering in time, which is why we see the past, present, future in that order. Here, akramoparudam. So, in a way that is not in any sequence, which means all of it together. Akramoparudam vivekajam jnanam. So the jnanam that is arising from this particular viveka between the sattva and the purusha brings about the knowledge of the gunas in their character as being capable of bringing about each and everything. And furthermore, where the sequence of past, present, future does not exist, that sequence goes away and everything is available as knowledge altogether. That is known as sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. So it is the complete 360 degree knowledge, not only of everything, but also in terms of time. So now, this siddhi, the sarvadhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, ityesha, it has a technical term to refer to it, called vishoka. So ityesha Vishoka nama siddhi. So this is a siddhi known as Vishoka. Yam prapya, having attained the siddhi, yogi sarvajñah kshina klesha bandhanaha vashi viharati. So what happens when these siddhis arise? The siddhi known as Vishoka. The yogi is a sarvajñah, one who has complete knowledge, omniscient. And furthermore, kshina klesha bandhanaha. So the bondage made up of klesha and karma has gone away, has been destroyed, has faded away. So kshina klesha bandhanaha. Vashi, one who has the vasha, who has things under his control. And this, in this manner, the yogi then viharati, means that is how he conducts his life. So there is a slight aspect here that has not been discussed, but that in Brahma Sutra and Vedanta it does get discussed as mentioned earlier, where as long the sharira remains, as long as the prarabdha karma is continuing. So in this case, all the bondage is gone, but the yogi still exists with his body and mind and indriyas and so on, but he is completely free of bondage. And not only that, he has the complete siddhi of sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. So this is the exalted state coming from the sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya state. So that is Sutra 3.49 along with its bhashya.
So the second part of the siddhi is sarvajñātṛtvaṃ out of sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya. So this is the second siddhi of the nature of all knowership, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, all knowership. So one should understand the difference between sarvajña and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. The Ishvara is described as sarvajña, that means he knows everything. And in case of a yogi, it is sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, that means capable of knowing everything. So that is sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. Now what is this sarvajñātṛtvaṃ? Sarvatmanam gunanam shanta udita abhyapadesha dharmattena vyavasthitānam and akramaparudham. So this is wonderful predication here. See, any object of knowledge has three states. Actual state, and then there is a potential state before that, and there is a latent state after the actual state. So everything comes from potential to actual and proceeds to latent. And we have seen this in Parinama Sutra, Prakriti Parinama Sutra, Dharma Lakshana Avastha Parinama. There we had seen that there was mention of this, Shanta Udita Avyapadesha. Shanta means the latent state, post-actual state. And Udita means the actual state. And Avyapadesha means prior to actual state. So namely potential, actual, latent. This is how the krama is. Everything comes from potential to actual and proceeds from actual to latent. This is the krama, this is the succession. Now, when we have the knowledge of actual, we do not have the knowledge of the potential. It doesn't include. If you see the rose, it is not necessary that you will see the seed form at the same time. Although you might be knowing that from seed form you get the plant, and from plant you get the flower, and that's a rose is a flower. Yet when we sight the rose, we don't have in our purview the seed state, nor the flower is going to become rotten. So that is the state that is yet to come for an actual flower, actual rose. So when we have knowledge of anything empirically, we have knowledge of the actual state. When we are looking at the seed, we don't have the knowledge of the flower that is going to come out of it, or whatever is going to happen after the flower is rotten, or goes into latency. So we don't have the knowledge of all these three states. Whereas for a yogi, his sarvajñātṛtvaṃ is of the nature of this. It is not that he knows all objects simultaneously, but any object he knows in all its stages. So this is clarified by Vyasa. Sarvajñātṛtvaṃ means any object in its all states, and that too akramoparudham. That means in one single stroke he gets the knowledge. This is therefore it is intuitive mystic knowledge, not a empirical knowledge. In empirical knowledge we cannot get the knowledge of all the three states simultaneously in one stroke. But with the mysterious process of knowledge, or mysticism of knowledge, or intuitive mystic knowledge, it happens akramoparudham. There is no need of krama. Simultaneously. That means it is all dimensional knowledge of any object that is knowable to yogi. When he has jnātṛtvaṃ, he has knowership, he will be able to have the knowership all dimensional. That is all the states, namely potential, actual, latent. So this is clearly mentioned in Vyasa's comment. And that's why it is called vivekajam jnanam. Vivekajam, born out of viveka, born out of discriminate discernment. And that is the meaning of sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. And more importantly, he says this is that plane called Vishokanama Siddhi. You should recall that we had seen on earlier occasion Madhumati plane of Siddhi, Madhupratika plane of Siddhi, and now this is the third called Vishoka. And while there are four, so this is the third calibration of a yogi, Samadhi attained yogi. The first caliber of Samadhi attained yogi is called Madhubhumi. The second plane is called Madhupratika, which we had seen in the Sutra of Indriya Jaya. And now this is the third plane called Vishoka Nama Siddhi. And by Vishoka Nama Siddhi, he gets this sarvajñātṛtvaṃ cha. Sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, all knowership. And yogi sarvajñaha. Therefore he becomes sarvajña. How does it happen? Kshina klesha bandhano vashi. Because of the kleshas attenuated, totally destroyed, totally neutralized, he is able to come to this Vishoka plane of Siddhi. So that's how the sarvajñātṛtvaṃ is explained. And again here it is also mentioned as sarvajñatvam, sarvajñaha. He is sarvajñaha. So only in the mysticism the difference is mentioned between the sarvajñatvam of a yogi and sarvajñatvam of a antaryami. The antaryami Ishvara is indwelling everyone. So my knowledge is also his knowledge. He is also your indweller. So your knowledge is also his knowledge. He is indweller of every single being, and therefore every being's knowledge is his knowledge. So his sarvajñatva is by antaryamitvam, which is wonderfully described in Vedanta Shastra. While the yogi is not antaryami of everything, but yet he has this sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, the all-knowership, and in that sense he is sarvajña because he knows the past, present, future. And even in common man's parlance, if somebody knows the past, present, future, we say he is omniscient. And even the omniscience was so described in Yoga Sutra, first chapter, while Ishvara was described, that the sarvajña term was described where in more or less degree there is power to know past, present, future of everything. While we mortals, those things are behind the iron curtains. If we are seeing the present, we don't see the past. We don't see the future. We cannot be seeing the future. We don't have instrumentation and capacity to know the potential, actual, latent stages or states. Whereas now yogi attains that and all that in one single stroke and not in sequential order. Like we know only by sequential order. After you know the lower knowledge, you get to know the higher knowledge. After having known the higher knowledge, you will get to know more higher knowledge. So we have a ladder concept. We have a ladder concept in knowledge. Unless we know something inferior, lower, we won't know the higher. Whereas here, it is all in one stroke. This happens by samadhi process and not by empirical process. So that is what is mentioned here as sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. So this is the second siddhi of the sutra. And more importantly, vishokanama siddhi. Four kinds of yoga siddhas are mentioned. Madhu, Bhumi, Madhu Pratika, now Vishoka. And the last one is the pinnacle point, of course, which will be described later in the text. So those are the four planes of yogi which are also getting mentioned in the text of Patanjali. Okay.
Yes. So now let's look at the next sutra and cover as much as we can today and continue next time. The sutra 3.50 is as follows. Tadvairāgyādapi doṣabījakṣaye kaivalyam. So finally, we now encounter the term kaivalyam here in the third chapter. So where does it come from? The kaivalyam. It says tadvairāgyādapi doṣabījakṣaye kaivalyam. So now the yogi has obtained the sattvapuruṣānyatākhyāti or vivekakhyāti, which is sort of the pinnacle point, the greatest realization. Not only has that come about, from there, the siddhis that we saw, sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, which are of such a great measure and so exalted. Having come to that point, when yogi develops vairagya for that as well, which means there is no attachment. In fact, there is complete non-attachment and going away from even this exalted realization, this state of exalted realization and these extremely high powers. When the yogi goes away from that through vairagya, because there is no attachment, so there is what is known as disinterestedness. So the non-attachment, disinterestedness to something that is so exalted. When that happens, then doṣabījakṣaye. There is a doṣabījakṣaye that happens. Kshaya means destroying, going away, fading away. Of what? Of the doṣabīja. So doṣānām sarvadukkhanām bījāni klesha karma vipāka samskārāha teshām kṣayah. So the dosha, which is all the dukkhas, and as we have seen, dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. For a viveki, everything is of the nature of dukkha or heya paksha, etc. We have seen different terms. So now, what is the bija for all of this? What is bija means seed? What is the seed that leads to all of these doshas? It is the klesha, karma, vipaka and the samskaras arising from them. We have seen what are the kleshas and how that leads to karma. The karma leads to certain fruition, which leads to again samskara and vasana and so on. This whole thing that ties one to the world, the bondage, all of that gets removed or goes away. So that is doṣabījakṣaye. So when the very seed of it, which is of the nature of klesha, karma, vipaka, samskara, the very seed goes away, and there is no question of the dosha being around. And when there is no dosha, or there is no karmashaya, or no klesha, there is no bondage. So when there is no bondage, nothing that is tying the Purusha to the Prakriti, so to speak, what happens is kaivalyam. So, kevalasya bhavaha kaivalyam. So that is how the term comes about. So it is that state where the Purusha is on his own or on its own, with where the association with the Prakriti has gone away. So that is kaivalyam. So all the seeds of dosha, all the seeds of dukkha have been destroyed and removed. When does that happen? Tadvairāgyāt. That comes from vairagya, the non-attachment, complete disinterestedness. With respect to what? Not with respect to normal, ordinary, mundane attractions and things. With respect to even the highest of the purest knowledge of the nature of sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya. And then the highest and the greatest of powers, coming from all the purity, which is sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. When there is non-attachment, even with respect to that, which is something that is so exalted and pure, even that goes away, where the bondage due to the sattva guna also goes away essentially. And when that happens, Purusha, or the Purusha gets the what is known as the kevalavastha, and that kevalasya bhavaha, that state is known as kaivalyam. So that is the meaning of the sutra 3.50.
So, tadvairāgyādapi, tadvairāgya. About that, about what was discussed in the previous sutra 3.49, that is sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, coming out of sattvapuruṣānyatākhyāti. So this is the vairagya for sattvapuruṣānyatākhyāti itself and the effects thereof. Now you should recall in the topic of asampragnāta samadhi discussed in the first chapter, where we were told that there is something called as paravairagya. Aparavairagya is Vashikara Vairagya and Paravairagya is the Supreme Vairagya. And in the last sutra, this previous sutra itself, we discussed the Vashikara. Vyasa mentioned that it is Vashikara Vairagya, exaltation, supremacy in it. But then there is Paravairagya as well. What is that Paravairagya? That gets defined while asampragnāt samadhi was described in the first chapter. That the viveka khyati is outcome of sampragnāta samadhi. And that is the only vritti which is there in that asmita anugamat kind of sampragnāt samadhi. When that vritti too is restrained, which is the last vritti, culminating vritti, final vritti, whether that vritti is also restrained, then it becomes asampragnāta samadhi. So here the same thing has been told, same concept, idea has been told by saying tadvairāgyādapi. That means what was described was sattvapuruṣānyatākhyāti. When that also is restrained, naturally the effects thereof are also restrained. Sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ are also given up. There is vairagya to them as well. And then what happens is doṣabījakṣaye, very seed of all defects, which are the klesha vasanas and karma vasanas. The very seed form of those are also neutralized. So when as we have heard on an earlier occasion, the burnt seed state. When there is a burnt seed state, no sprout comes up from the seed. So therefore, for all times, there is no bondage thereafter. If there is no bondage, that is the isolation of Purusha from the Prakriti. And that isolation of Purusha from Prakriti is called kaivalyavastha. And that is therefore the term kaivalya, coming from that kaivalyavastha. That is complete separation from any kind of contact of Prakriti in whatsoever nature and for all times. And that is by the kaivalyam. So that supreme siddhi can also be given up by vairagya, and then the result is the spiritual samam bonam called kaivalya, moksha, nirvana, emancipation, salvation, isolation. Now that's what the sutra is mentioning. Tadvairāgyādapi doṣabījakṣaye kaivalyam. Okay.
So we'll look at the bhashya in the next session. But we have stopped today at a very wonderful point where the kaivalyam comes in. And let's also look next time at some discussion in the comments as to why the kaivalyam was introduced at this stage, whereas there are still some sutras to go in the Vibhuti-pada. So let's recite on the slokas on Guruji and stop for today. Vaijñānikam pravaktritva āsaneshu kalavidam yogābhyāse ca tattvajñam vandeham sundaram gurum yoga vriksho hi lokesmin yat preranena varditah yogacārya guro tubhyam sundaraya namo namaha. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.